Salt, Pesia. Good afternoon, everyone. I am here to welcome all of you to yet another session of IndigiPalooza. This is on behalf of the Missoula Public Library, Celia Avila, and myself, Anna East from the Chickadee Community Services. Sorry, this has been a long day. I am all wrapped up in my head. We would love to just welcome you to this afternoon session, and you know, as the executive director of Chickadee Community Services, we are the fiscal agent, and I get to see every donation that comes in, and we have had donations in every dollar amount from very small to very large from many, many people. Over 500 people gave for this event to happen. And so we just really appreciate all of the donors. I do want to call out our tobacco level sponsors of $5,000 and above. We had the Montana Historical Society, the Henry Family Foundation, the Missoula Public Library Foundation, Sandra Rowe, and the Potlatch Fund. So thank you to all of them. And to all of the hundreds of people who gave in any amount that they could afford. And so with that, I'm going to hand it over to Montana Poet Laureate, Chris Latreille. But actually, first, I just want to say that I feel very, very pleased to be able to say this in front of him, because I am always talking about it every time I have anything to do with promoting or presenting or sharing John Pepion's art. I always say, and he was my high school student. So now we're either both really old or really young. I don't know. Here you go, Chris.
All right. Bonjour, bon après-midi, Indigenous Maganadug. That is hello and good afternoon. All of my relatives in Anishinaabe, and Michif, which is the two languages of the Little Shell people. And given that a number of you have been in every room that I've been in today, I mean, it's the long game. I always talk about the long game, but the finish line is in sight. I'm gonna thank everybody who's been here all day. You know, every one of these panels has been full by the time we got halfway into it, and we're just overjoyed at the enthusiasm and the fact that so many of you just showed up to celebrate with us. And you know, this is kind of the last panel, because after this it's just hip hop, which I can't wait for. Yeah. And so this panel was the idea for this one. You know, we talk a lot about. We've brought it up multiple times today. Just the idea that what it means to be Indigenous somehow ended like in 1870 or 1880. That all anybody wants from us is these images and themes that are kind of ancient in some ways. And as artists and entrepreneurs and storytellers, you know, it's our responsibility to continue to prove over and over again that yes, we can honor our past while living in the present. And as makers and speakers and artists, as what we've assembled on this panel, is proof that we are doing that. And we have a couple artists, John and Stella, and well, you're all artists in one form or another, but we have our food person and we have our photographer for this event. These are all ways that we tell stories. So John tells stories with his beautiful art, and John is responsible for the magpie that you see on all the IndigiPalooza stuff. It was very gracious in letting us use that. He doesn't have to do that. You know, it's just part of the relationship that we have. I have this beautiful buffalo beaded medallion that I was going to wear today because I got chastised because I don't wear it. And you see, I forgot it. But my relative Carrie, who was one of the representatives, the first, and this is the question I'm going to start with, is we met like 1,500 miles away from here. So we were both Little Shell representatives invited to a commemoration of the Treaty of Old Crossing of 1863, which is in Huot, Minnesota. And Carrie was there with not only to represent us as Little Shell, but she had her van and maybe a couple kids with you too, didn't you? Couple granddaughters, and you know, selling her work as well as representing our people in a place where we hadn't been for 150 plus years. And that's road miles in service to your art. And I wonder if you could talk about that level of commitment and maybe tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do, because I don't really do introductions.
Bonjour, my name is Carrie Moran McCleary. I'm Little Shell Chippewa from Great Falls. I reside on the Crow Indian Reservation, and my company is Plain Soul. I am primarily a beadwork artist, but I am also a fashion designer and a doll maker. And I agree with everything Chris has said about the need for people to find indigeneity in this Hollywood version of something that we are no longer and we don't need to be. So I always modernize what I'm doing. I want it to be accessible to everyone. And yeah, there will be things that I make that are just for Native people, but by and large, I want everyone to represent what is a part of our culture of Montana. Okay, so how did we meet? Oh, oh my gosh. Okay, 1,500 miles. That was a great trip. My granddaughters kept asking when we were going to get there because I think it was like a 13-hour drive from from Crow. And boy, they were the best hosts. We were at Red Lake, and that was amazing. But it was really a homecoming in many ways. The tribe was so kind to us, and I had called ahead of time and said, hey, like, can I bring my stuff? Because, you got to make the balance sheet work. So if you're driving that far, you're going to take your art. Like, that's just how I am. And it was really neat because people responded to it. They recognized it. And for me, sometimes, because I do live on the Crow Reservation, people are like, it takes them back a little minute. Like, they're like, what are you beading? Like, we bead differently. We all have different patterns that we enjoy and that we cling to. And there's some similarities, but so that's that. It was a great trip. And Chris, I've been telling people all day about your bolo, even though you're not wearing it. Because if you would like to know what it looks like, since Chris never wears it, I do have stickers, pins, and keychains available in my book.
So what it is, it's a buffalo with the number 574 on it. Yeah, George has a sticker of it back there. We're masters. See, we are entrepreneurs here. We're like marketing, like subliminal marketing almost. But yeah, and it has the numbers 574 beaded into it because when the Little Shell received federal restoration, we were the 574th tribe. So my cousin commissioned you.
You have the tattoo.
Oh, that's right. I do have a tattoo of 574. So yeah, and I guess what you said that I was kind of fishing for is perfect. That if you're going to make this trip, you're taking your stuff because you've got to figure out a way. And as artists, that's what we have to do sometimes. It's like a musician carrying a guitar because you're going to busk for a few dollars to make the gas to get to that next town or whatever it is that you're doing. And that is a part of the hustle in the early days and ongoing, but particularly in the early days, to establish yourself in getting the workout. And John, I want to take it to you now. And what is your version? So even if you don't know John Pepion's work, you know it because you've seen it, because this is a man who his stuff is blowing up everywhere. And I'm so happy to see that because it's beautiful and it is representative of where you come from. But what does that hustle in the early days to get to where your art is appearing on the cover of a documentary by Ken Burns?
Well, first of all, my name is John Pepion. I'm Blackfeet and based out of my community. And years of trial and error, years of hustling, years of being crazy, years of wasting my time, and a lot of tears, a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. But for example, you could say I came a long ways from doing art on napkins for drinks to where I'm at now. That's how far I've came. Also celebrating sobriety as well. Yeah. And then been doing it all my life, come from a family of artists, and just listen to a lot of artists, a lot of mentors. I get questions all the time from younger artists how to do it. I don't have the right answers, and I'm still learning myself. Yeah.
Mariah, someone might question, how is storytelling part of what you do as a food sovereignty cook, however you would describe that? What is the storytelling aspect of what you do?
Thought these were softball questions. No, just kidding. Okay, CEO, everyone. My name's Mariah Gladstone. I run a business that is dedicated to revitalizing Indigenous food systems. It was definitely not something they told me in high school was a real job, but here I am. And it's interesting because I don't think of what I do very much as storytelling. But if anyone has been to a presentation of mine at any point, everything I do has a story, right? Every ingredient, all of these indigenous components that are going into our recipes have stories, whether that was intentional agricultural breeding over generations to select for certain qualities, whether it is a story of an ingredient that fostered resilience in the face of the boarding school era, whether it is the foods and how they were hunted and the times of year that they were hunted and the treatment processes for all of those things. They all have stories. And so sometimes, because the work that I'm doing is very modern and it's connected in the 21st century, these stories come from different places and different communities. And I try to honor the places where those foods, whether they're plant or animal or fungi or whatever they may be, has the story with that, but also the interconnectedness with our indigenous relatives that have cultivated and cared for those things. And I try to bring those into the work that I do because I think that I can share recipes with people, but I think that stories are something that people remember on a much deeper level. And, the stories, whether it's land management or whether it's trickster stories or whatever it may be that got us to those foods, are something that we can honor as we're eating those and then remember that alongside the flavor. So I try to blend all those things and also remind us that, as we're making foods and we're sharing foods, we're doing that together in 2025. And all of those stories are the journey that those foods came to get to the place we're all at today.
Yeah, I think food can be underrated as a storytelling medium. I mean, if we think about, like, if you're traveling somewhere, you ask people who've been there, well, where's a good place to eat? Or if you come back from someone, people say, well, where did you eat? It's like language. We can't live without it. We can't live without food, and food's good, right? We want to know where the good stuff is, and I think that is part of what the storytelling aspect of the land and where it's and the season that it's available in and where you have to be to get it. And when you think about, like, one of the biggest kind of revelations I had the first time I visited the Turtle Mountain Reservation, which is where we come from essentially as Little Shell people too, and the Turtle Mountains, was a place where seasonally our people lived because of the food that was available at certain times of year. And then when you shrink the places that were allowed to live to one place that was never intended to feed the entire community full time, all the time, within a generation, all of that food is gone. Whether it's moose or beaver or any of the things they were using, because now they had to absorb the pressure of full time. And that is part of that story too, of how our lives were changed by this constriction of the land that we were able to live on. Whitney, I'm going to turn to you now, because as someone who has at times cobbled part of my living together through photography, we invited Whitney to take photos for us, and then said, well, it makes total sense for you to be on this entrepreneur trying to make a living doing this work as a storyteller through the medium of photography. What do you have to say about that? And please introduce yourself if you would like to.
On? Is this on? Okay.
Okay, my name is Whitney. I preside on the Pecani Nation, which is across the mountains, east side of the mountains. And there's kind of many levels to my photography journey, but it's something that has been instilled in me ever since I was a kid, like truly like 7 years old. My parents were both very, very athletic people. And of course, as their firstborn, I came out the artist. I still enjoyed sports, you know, it was a good outlet, but I was very much more into writing and drawing and band, and I saw photography as an art as well. And I always thought that I saw the world a little differently, and photography was a way for me to express how I saw the world. And I would spend a lot of time in my youth just going out by myself with my camera and just taking photos of whatever I found interesting. No rhyme or reason, and it could be from the smallest little bug to a sunset or a landscape. And over time, what became just kind of like a hobby to express myself artistically and how I saw the world, my family kind of started to encourage me, well, you know, maybe you should kind of take it further. You should explore documenting stories and, you know, trying to publish them and put them out in the world and do things like that. And I was like, him and Han, like, I'm not that good, you know. And but they believed in me, and I'm grateful that they pushed me to do that, because I never in a million years would have. I would have just been that hobby photographer, just taking pictures and maybe hanging them on my wall, maybe just keeping them on a drive on my computer or what have you. And so that's what brought me here today as a professional photographer doing events. And even as an event photographer, I don't like to label myself as like a portrait or a documentary or whatever. I feel like I wear many hats, because even like an event like this, I like to look at the emotion of people. You know, how do people react when they're in the crowd watching our conversations? How do their hands look? You know, what kind of shoes are they wearing? Their tattoos. So I try to look at like those intricate things, you know, as well as like the bigger picture. And I try to kind of encompass that in my work as a whole. And as an Indigenous photographer, I try to focus more on the real. I know we see a lot of poverty, and it is, you know, part of our story, unfortunately. But I try to kind of steer away from that. I want to show people as they are. I want to show the laughter and, you know, like the happiness of living in an Indigenous community. And so I try to just capture the real, and I try to really make that like the essence of my work. Even if someone doesn't get it right away, I still, you know, in my heart feel like that's how I want to represent our people. And it's kind of hard, because, you know, everyone kind of has like their own way of how they might want you to capture something, you know, or whatever. And sometimes you have to say no to those people. But I just try to really just kind of embody, like I said, that realness, that emotion, those little intricate details that sometimes people might not notice or see. And so far, the response has been great. You know, people like that I pay attention to those things. I don't know if that really good.
It's great.
Yeah.
Yes. No, that's wonderful. You mentioned happy, you know, showing happy, and it makes me think of Stella's art. And just those, when I look at your art, it makes me happy. Just the little shapes and the representations, kind of in a playful way of relatives who often maybe don't get represented that way, or get represented in a way that maybe can be borderline offensive to some of us. How did you arrive at that? Is that just what emerged immediately, or did you have to follow an arc of, because Stella Nall is another one that if you don't know who she is, you know her work, because it's everywhere. And it makes me happy to see it. So how did you arrive at this place? Oh.
Thank you. Yeah, well, I think what I've always gravitated towards making art to follow the happiness. I think that I have sometimes a hard time with anxiety and having a kind of the voice of a weenie in my speaking voice. So sometimes I think that that pushed me towards making visual work and writing to convey the stories I want to tell. But then also sometimes I like to just paint them for myself, just to be alone in my studio and be like, so, yeah.
But you have since began writing poetry as well. Is that something you incorporate with your art? What's the difference in the storytelling that you're doing with your poetry versus the stuff that we all know you for with your art? And like when you're asked to paint a mural, that's definitely a story of some kind.
Yeah, I think that like you said, wearing a lot of hats. I love to wear a lot of hats as well, except for real hats, because I think my skull is kind of shaped like a koala. But in the different hats of doing poetry or murals, or if it's a studio painting that I'm doing at my house, I tend to pick the medium that I'm working with based off of the story that I'm trying to tell or the story that I'm wondering about. And I think murals have been a really great way to do that because they're so big and they have just an inherent place-based nature about them. So a lot of the stories I'm interested in are about community and people and the creatures that are out there, and then place is a big part of it. So having something that is straight up in the place is a good way to tell the story about the place. And then for the poems, I've always really loved reading poetry and always loved writing little notes in my phone app, and I thought, no one will be seeing that. And sometimes I still think that about my poetry, but I've been really inspired by all of the Indigenous literature that's been coming out, I guess, for a long while now, but especially I think I started engaging with it the past couple of years. Like, I love your work. I love so many different Native poets that it made me think that the stories I'm trying to tell, gotta tell them, even if it makes me feel bashful. So
Yeah.
I blacked out when I was saying that, so I hope it made sense. Just sweating.
I know, this is hard.
Love hats.
Yeah. Yeah, this can be hard. So I'm going to ask a question of the group, and I hope this question doesn't blow up in my face. But how many of you have been asked to contribute your artwork to some kind of a fundraiser or something, like as a donation to raise money or something? And of course, every single one of you, because art is so key to who we are as people, that we know if somebody wants to raise money that art is going to be a good way to do it, because people will want, I want a Stella Nall piece, or I want a John Pepion piece, or whatever it is. And this is all for me to set up beef I have with a local financial institution. Because way back a year ago, when we first decided we were going to do IndigiPalooza, we made a list of people we might reach out to. And we reached out to about half a dozen local financial institutions whose logos often appear as sponsors of different places. And of those 6, none of them contributed to IndigiPalooza, which kind of goes hand in hand. I saw Nora maybe in here earlier. I don't know if she's here now, but she wrote a story about how Native communities are loaned money by financial institutions far below the average of everybody else. And there's all these bullshit reasons, but they are bullshit, which is an Anishinaabe word for bullshit. And the one financial institution that actually answered said, we give a certain percentage of our revenue for philanthropic reasons or whatever. And they listed the 3 like community, economic, and something else. And they said they always felt that art was kind of on the fringe of those important elements of our society, so they don't donate to art-based projects. We love what you do, but sorry, go find some money somewhere else. And that enraged me. Not because we didn't get the money, we didn't need it, and I'm glad to say we didn't take a single cent from any financial institution to make this happen. But at the same time, whose efforts and energy and creativity are the go-to when it comes to trying to raise money for these other things that are allegedly more important than the art that's funding them in the first place. And that was really literally an opportunity for me to get on a soapbox and complain about this. But that is a representation, I think, of the importance of what folks like we have here offer to the community, recognized even by elements of the community who don't even understand what it is they're asking for. How do you handle that? Because that's part of that hustle at some point, like in my rock days, I can't tell you how many benefit shows I've played where we didn't get a penny, yet there's almost an expectation that's like, well, you'll get the exposure. Yeah, well, exposure doesn't pay the rent. How do you handle that? And do you reach a threshold where you say, I'm just not going to do this anymore? John, what do you think?
Well, it's a good topic because it happens a lot. And that's the famous saying, doesn't matter what level of art you do. Everybody's always saying, well, you'll get good exposure. And I'm starting to find out that you could die from exposure. And so as artists, we're just like plumbers and electricians. We deserve to be paid for what we do. People always ask us to do stuff for free all the time. It never stops. And one of my few famous things is remind me, send me email. Remind me, send me email. Did I respond to you? Because I get asked things all the time, and so for me personally, I limit donations a year, and I donate to specific causes sometimes in my community or outside of my community, and sometimes I don't talk about it. People won't even know about it, and I'll keep it to myself. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it's cancer related. Sometimes I donate my time. A group from here came into our community for suicide, and I donated my time for like 3 days to go into elementary schools and work with students for art for free. So I donated my time, and then so I'll do. So it's a limit. It's like a limit for me because I get asked all the time. Even like a weird organization, some kind of wives group wanted some artwork, and I was just like, I don't know. Uh-huh. But yeah, it happens all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Whitney, how about you?
Yeah, so I think with that, I think people kind of forget that I think they think because you're good at art, like you're just like naturally good at it. And so they don't think that there's like a lot of hard work that goes into it, right? And like making a piece or making a photograph, and so I think people just generally just don't realize like there's more to it than just being talented, right? I definitely still struggle with this, where I have to reach out to like my mentors and colleagues and be like, hey, am I asking enough for this? What do you think of this gig? They want to offer me this. Does it need to be more or less? And they'll mentor me. And sometimes what they tell me, I'm just like, you mean I can ask for that much? And it just like blows me away because I want to ask for pennies, because I still kind of have imposter syndrome about myself sometimes, where I'm not worth that much, right? But they have to remind me, as friends and mentors, like, you are worth that much, your time is worth that much. And they remind you have equipment, you have the editing, you have the travel. And so once they itemize it like that for me, then I'm like, oh yeah, okay. So there is reasons for these, prices. I've definitely, in my earlier days, pay for exposure, and it helped a little bit, but it wasn't until I realized that exposure was like beyond just a social media post or maybe like a brochure or a poster or something. Like it was like, this is going to be like worldwide. And it wasn't until like after the fact where I was like, dang, like I probably should have pursued that more. Because now my picture is like being used all over and they don't credit me. No one knows it was me that took it, So I think it's it's just like being confident in yourself too. I still struggle with being confident in myself. I'm getting better. But I'm with John too. There are times where I'll look at the situation, at the group or the people who approach, and I'll say, I'll do this because I want to work with you. I like what you stand for, and I have no problem being like that. But you can't make it like the norm if you want this to be something that is your job or your career you want to make money off of, So that's how I'd answer that. Sorry for burping into the mic.
That's okay. That's okay. So one of the things about Montana, is the vastness of the landscape. So, like Carrie, living in Crow, what is it? Probably 6 hours for you to get here? Yes. Well, yes. Uh-huh. So it's like if you come and you're going to do a gig in Missoula, you're going to set up your table and you're going to sell stuff. It's not a one-day thing. You're going to have to overnight, which means you're either going to sleep in your van or you're going to get a hotel room. Yeah, God, no, those days are over, right? So the cost of the hotel room, the meals, and so if you come and do a thing like this, what's kind of your break-even point? Like how much? Because a lot of times, and you didn't have one here, but a lot of times places will charge you a fee to have a table to vend in the first place. So you're overcoming your overhead as well as the cost to actually have a table there, which they are totally having you there because they want that to be part of the draw for them to make money. So can you break down kind of the logistics of being a person making jewelry and beading work, and then not only the time making it, but then the time traveling and being set up, and how does that work?
Yeah. That's a good question. And I'm a big supporter of all, Native artists, and I'm always encouraging folks at home and new people. And like if I'm done with equipment, I'm always finding someone to give it to. Or my daughter and I are both big thrifters, so we find something that would be a good display or something somebody can use. I'm always trying to hand it off to another younger artist, because I've been really blessed by an amazing artist community at Crow, where we've all really lifted each other up. And so I've learned over the years, I think this is going to be year number 9. The overhead will kill you. You have to think about like your shopping bags. You have to think about your credit card fees. You have to think about the technology that you need for your job. You have to think about just the bandwidth in general of your time for items. If you're an entrepreneur, you're not working 9 to 5 or 8 to 5. I am really fortunate. I have a studio, so I'm always thinking about my studio payment. But I really pretty much work 7 days a week, 365. It's just how it is. I very rarely get, really time off. But I love what I do, so I would like to do it. And I can make my own hours, and I can, make my own time. But the money, you also get into a thing with your taxes. So unfortunately, this makes me crazy. As a Native person, if you live and work on your own reservation, you don't pay state taxes. That's kind of tough to do as a Little Shell tribal member. We don't have a reservation, so I'm always like, what the heck? So I'm always bugging legislators. Hey, could you write a bill for me? Hook it up, man. And my county doesn't make me pay county taxes as a Little Shell tribal member, so at least there's that. But you really need to keep track of your taxes, and so the reason you do that, so you're keeping track of all this overhead. I'm keeping all my receipts for my meals because I can write half of it off. I'm keeping track of what I purchased to make art with because I can write that off. So you have to really, when you start doing that is when you really realize where your fees are, where your costs are. And you do want to do that. I know so many people that worked under the table for years or whatever, and you don't really want to do that, because then you do want to go get a loan to build a studio, and you have to take the bank your last 3 years of your taxes. During COVID, they had I can't remember what the name of the program was, but like if you showed them your taxes, they sent you money, and we were like, "Wait, where's the taxes?" I mean, me and my bestie is Della, big hair stump. We were like, "Oh my god!" And out of our crew, we were kind of the only ones that had been keeping track and actually paying our taxes as full-time artists, and so we got a little dough. We were pretty excited, and I got a little dough from the tribe that time. I was like, that check came. I'm like, no way. Because we don't get per caps, yo. So I was shocked, but you do have to keep track of it. It's not only your mileage, it's wear and tear on your vehicle. I'd have to look. I have a mileage app, so I have to pay for the app, but that's tax deductible. But I think, I can tell you anything, it's tax deductible, I can tell you. But, I think I did like 40,000 miles last year. So, no, not 40,000. No, 25,000 miles last year. So if you want to, for the kind of art that I do, I need to start going to art markets, So I'm traveling to Indianapolis. I travel to Tulsa. I travel to Jackson. I'm kind of going all over. And you have hotel fees and you have this and that. And luckily, I have gal pals and we kind of split it, and I pack a cooler or whatever, but you do have to figure that in, and then you have to do things. What I've learned is that I call my artist prints, like my scarves, my acrylics, the stickers. Those are photographs of my beadwork, because I can't make an artist print like Pepion and Stella, and I can't. I mean, I guess I could, but those are my artist prints, right? Because that's kind of passive income. You have to pay to have them made, but I only have 2 cans. I can only beat so much. So you start to figure stuff out like that. So yeah, it's, if you want to know how to be an entrepreneur, you just ask me later and I'll tell you all of the tax write-offs.
Thank you for all that. That's great. So how many of you feel like your life as an artist is like a cobbled together experience? Like it's like you have the one thing you do, but then there's the scarcity mindset that if a potential gig, kind of what you do, arrives, you're just like, well, I can do that. Because even Joy Harjo this morning on the way to the airport was telling me how, well, I thanked her for coming here. And she said, yeah, it was great. I'm trying to travel less, but travel is how I make my living, traveling and doing these talks and readings and things like that. She said, because the poetry books don't make nearly enough money for her to make a living at. And she's like the poet laureate of the frickin' world, and if her books don't generate enough income for someone as magnificent as she is, what hope is there for the rest of us? And I tell people, I am a professional writer. I make my living as a writer, but like Joy, it's all the writing adjacent things. If somebody says, hey, will you come yell at us about why we're terrible people for colonizing you? It's like, put a couple zeros on that check and I'm there, and I'm just, Mariah, what is your creative, entrepreneur-ish, whatever you want to call it, life like? Is there like comfort in that? Do you feel like you've got a stable thing that's just going to kind of roll along, or is there always that precarity of existence as a creative, artistic, entrepreneurial person that, yeah, this thing's great, but you're always looking for the hole it's going to fall down and the thing that you might move into the place of it?
You're going to send me into panic attacks. No, just kidding. I feel attacked, though. Yeah, I mean, I think, especially thinking about folks on the retail side of the work that other folks do on this panel, there's a reason that I don't have a restaurant, and instead, a lot of the work that I do is educational. It's classes, it's speaking, it's turning food as a vehicle to discuss the colonization of the Americas and the forced dependence on government food systems. And here, have a meatball. And lately I've started doing more catering because there's a market for that. And yes, I get asked to donate catering experiences and things like that. And I've gotten pretty good at saying to things that I'm interested in donating to, about, well, you're having it in the silent auction, like, we'll split it 50-50. There's options, there's alternative ways to do that. And when I first started IndigiKitchen, I was working as a steel gang roadmaster on the railroad, which is a badass job title, but it meant that I was basically working like 80 plus hours a week, traveling constantly, supervising a gang of 35 white guys, ripping the tracks out of the railroad and then replacing them with new ones. Yay, 21-year-old me with an engineering degree. And then I would take vacation days to go to food sovereignty conferences, and at one point I was like, someone needs to start a cooking show so that we can learn how to work with our traditional foods again. I was like, I'm gonna do it. Someone's like, sure you are, Mariah. So then I had to do it. So I was, using what little videography knowledge I had and cobbling things together, and I took other jobs after that, always kind of filling in, vacation days and weekends and evenings and stuff to build this business. And I finished an AmeriCorps term, writing a climate action plan, so it was coming to the end of that. And I felt like, hey, wait, I'm spending so much time on this business, and the income is to a point where I can live off of that. I can meet my expenses from what's coming in. My dad's a musician, so I understand uneven income streams at different times of the year. So I'm like, if I can budget through those like weird waves of December and January, like, great. And so I decided to make it a full-time thing at that point. And right now there is definitely uncertainty with waves of funding and different opportunities from different revenue streams and who might book us, and will the universities be allowed to bring Indians in for the sake of being Indians, and who knows. But I think I'm diversifying with catering a little bit, and I guess I always have an engineering degree to fall back on if it all goes to hell. But I think I have several years to feel a little bit more confident in my ability to have it as a full-time business, but it came from a place where there was a lot of time just building it and getting that boat close enough to the dock so I could jump.
Yeah. Well, and it's hard to say no, too, because you reach a point where you only have two hands to bead, or you only have so much time to paint or whatever. Stella, in the time I've known you, I've seen you go. You've really expanded in your, at least how you're recognized and the amount of work you do. And do you struggle with that? I mean, there's a joy to getting to a point where you can say no to something, but then there's also the terror of like, you're so used to grabbing every $50 you can, and then sometimes you don't have time.
I don't struggle with that. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, I think that I have a hard time still holding on to the kind of imposter syndrome and scarcity mindset where I'm always kind of waiting for it to all come crumbling down. So then it's really, really hard to say no to projects. But then I think just because making art comes from a place of joy, then if there's projects, then I tend to get really excited about them, and then I want to do everything that I can all at once. And then it's been a really big learning curve of like trying to acknowledge that there's only so much time that can go into things. And I broke my collarbone last year, which ended up being also kind of like a wake-up call, because then this whole calendar, I was like, had my usual frantic painting, but then it was like pushed back 3 months, which was a lot more than I thought would be for a collarbone. But they were like, don't move your arm. Like, what about for snacks? Nope. None of it. No snacks, no painting. So it's just been catching up, and I'll finally be caught up right after this. But I forget why I was talking about all that. Yeah. It's really hard to navigate saying no to things, but an important thing to do, especially in case you fall off your bike. Mm-hmm.
Whitney, how much does the ad
I wish there was a class, because first you start off taking pictures, and then you need a website. But then you have to figure out how to develop your website. And then you have to upkeep your website. And then you need business cards. And then you need a business email. And it's just like all these things. And when I was going into it, I thought I was just going to take pictures and people would hire me and it'd be a wonderful life as a photographer. I could travel. But there's way more to it, especially, you know, if you want it to, there's just like the business side of like all art, I think, you know. And I think these guys can agree too. There's like so much more under the iceberg that people don't see, that you have to do, that really takes up a lot of your time that you do not get paid for. And you have to do it because when you have to do it and, you know, you enjoy your craft. And so you have to upkeep that. Those are just the things that you have to do as an entrepreneur. And talking to some mentors in my career as a photographer, that's what they say. You have to be okay with not getting paid for certain things of that nature. It just has to be something that you do because you love photography or you love art or cooking, you know, beading. Those are just the things that you have to do because you love what you do and you love telling your story. Okay, and so I wish I could take like a 101 like business class, because a lot of things I did kind of have to teach myself on the fly. And yeah, there's YouTube, but there's like so many videos of like many different people who do things the same but like a little different. And so you still have to like filter through those videos and figure out which
one applies to you in a way, you know. And so like the self-taught is very, I never went to school for photography, so I don't know if that's something that they teach, maybe in journalism, I'm not sure, but yeah, it's tough, but I think once you figure out your flow, it's easier, you know, you just kind of make time for it, yeah.
All right, we're going to turn it over to questions. My mic died, so that's why I'm like going into plan B here. But does anybody have any questions for our panel today? Yes, in the back.
Thank you all for sharing. I'm curious about, kind of just to expand on what we were just talking about, it's just this tension between the fundamental need to support yourselves through the economic engine that exists, and also the meaningful, meaning-making qualities that is creative making. And what strategies do you use to keep your spirit inside of your artwork and stay connected to it even as you're trying to support yourself through it?
You guys get off, is that okay?
Yeah. Spreadsheets, which is not something I would have thought, but my sweetheart is Bill Nye the Science Guy, but not really. Don't, Bill. Sorry. He made me a spreadsheet that is like by the square inch for all the mediums that I do, and that's been really helpful because for a long time I was pricing my work based on how I was feeling that day, if I had a snack, the emotional connection I felt to the piece, and then there would be a huge disparity and also so much like fretting and panicking and feeling bashful for whenever the time came I had to put a price on it, and I realized no matter what the price was, I was going to feel ashamed. So then he made this spreadsheet so I can just have at least a base to start with and keep things consistent, and that made a really big difference. And then I guess for my work too, I started naming, when I paint a creature, I'll give it a name, like this is Stanley, instead of this is Little Bear number 6, because then I owe it to Stanley.
John.
I just wanted to add to the last panel question and your question. So as an artist, there's so many levels and it never changes. So one of the levels is the art of saying no. And once you learn the art of saying no, you'll feel very relieved, stress-free, and feel more better about yourself. And so for me personally, to create, I have to feel good. So if I don't feel too well mentally or work-wise, if I'm sick, I don't create at all. I have to feel good to create. And so I can go through periods of not creating that people might call procrastination. So artists are good at procrastination. So, and also with, as an artist, I learned to develop several lanes. So for example, I do gallery shows and museum shows. I do murals. I teach. I also have a small business of merch. And so I have all these levels that I can lean on, and newer lanes to continue on. So as an artist, I encourage people not just to be stuck in one lane, to keep going and never stop, and to know your worth, and then to protect your spirit. Talking about your spirit, I feel as an artist, art heals, and as one of the panelists earlier talked about how poetry and writing saved her life, I feel that art has saved my life.
I think that intersection of how do we support ourselves because capitalism exists, / how are we doing the work that we do in serving our communities and our overall ultimate goals within our personal value structure. Yes, the tightrope. I think, I don't know if any of us really got started doing the work that we're doing just to make money and make a living. That just happened to be, at least for myself, something that I realized along the way. And with that, my ultimate goal has always been like, how do we completely eliminate our dependence on external food systems so that we can restore the health of our bodies and our communities and the ecosystems that we harvest from? Big goals. But when encountered with, should I speak at this event? Should I go to this thing? Should I donate my time? Should I be paid to go to this thing, right? I'm always asking myself, does this serve the overall goals? One time I got asked to be in a Coca-Cola commercial celebrating the vibrancy of traditional foods. And I said,
Like, thanks for the offer. I don't think that our values are aligned, but thanks, And so there are things that I'm like, yeah, that'd probably be money and it'd probably be exposure, but it's not something that aligns with my overarching goals, right? And I think that's really important. And then also, in line with what John was saying, is just making sure that you're serving yourself. And if you're working or doing the work to the point where you are exhausted and you can't take care of your own needs or your own health or whatever that may be, you're not able to serve your own values, much less, truly be feeding and taking care of yourself if the work that's supposed to be taking care of you is harming you.
big minds almost. I kind of wanted to go off what Mariah and John were saying too. Personally, if I feel intuitively like something doesn't align, like Mariah was saying, I won't go for it at all. And I won't feel bad for it. I used to, when I was trying to get my name out there, I tried to grab every little thing that came my way, but that can make you burn out really quickly. There will be times where I'll feel like I just need a break, and I will set my camera down and I won't pick it up for a couple of weeks and just not feel bad about it. Just, kind of need like that mental kind of like creative break, right? Just kind of need to sit back and like kind of be, because a lot of my projects are very long term. And so there's seasons to the photos that I'm taking. There's a lot that goes into it that's like deeper than just like a short story. And so if I feel like I need to step back from the photos for a while and maybe focus on the written portion and start outlining, what do I want to capture? What's the feeling behind what I want to capture? So I'll kind of like switch modes a little bit. And I don't know if you guys are familiar with the Big Sky Journal, but last August, I photographed and wrote a piece for Big Sky Journal, actually about John. And that was my first written piece that had ever been published in a magazine. And I I was always a writer, like, I always felt like I was a writer, but again, with photography, I never saw myself as being like a published writer. Everyone around me seen it, but not me, you know? And so with that, kind of opened my mind to more avenues with photography where I could kind of package my photos into, here's my work, here's my written word that goes with it, because sometimes I feel like the stories I'm telling can really only be told by me because I'm living it, I'm in that space, you know. Someone from the outside, you know, they might see some things the same way, but they wouldn't really see it or understand it like I do. So that gave me like a confidence boost. And so now, if I feel like I just cannot do any more photos at this time, that's when I'll pull back, set the camera down, you know, let it chillax, and then I'll get kind of to the writing portion. And so I'm kind of like answering like all sorts of different questions that we had, but I just wanted to say that, you know, for any other artists in the room or, you know, anyone, you know, who are similar to us, you know, because like everyone said here, it's being confident in yourself, having those other avenues, but not stressing yourself out, you know. If you really truly feel like you need a break, just take the break. It's always going to be there to come back to. The business will always be there. You know what I mean? So please, I encourage you, just take the break. It's okay. You'll be fine. You can come back to it.
Just encouragement.
Other questions?
I appreciate you guys being here, and I'm working on starting my own business, and it's overwhelming. It's intricate details that you don't think of when you down to, you know, the website and everything, you know, it's overwhelming. But my question, that being said, is people stealing your work so much, especially with the internet these days. So I want to be really protective of the trademark. What is your experience with the application? I can imagine it's going to be hell. But I'm just curious what your experience is and how much you use trademark.
Everybody hear that?
Yeah.
Okay, question is, how do you handle the theft of your work because of the online world we live in? And do they use any form of trademarking to protect themselves? Right?
Yeah, so what kind of art do you do?
I'm going to be starting a native wear company, so.
Right on. Okay, so that's what's up. Okay, what's the name of the company? Nice. Two Feathers Clothing Company.
Nobody better steal
.com.
it.
Don't be stealing her name. You guys be looking out for it. Where do you live? Nice. Check out your store. She's going to be at all of the setups this December, ready to roll. So, you know, I would say it would be a good idea for you to actually get in contact with a patent attorney if there's certain things you want to do. And we kind of get overwhelmed as Native people. I think we don't want to like think about all this business stuff, but if you just break it down and start doing it and maybe set a couple of tasks for yourself. Don't think I have to do all this at once. Never think that. Think this week I'm gonna find out who might build a website for me. I wouldn't try and do it myself. I mean, apparently these guys are, but heck, no. Find someone to help, and probably because I'm old and we didn't have computers when I was in school, but I ain't doing that. So think about that too. Think about hiring other folks to help you along. But you know, this week I'm going to register my business name. This week I'm gonna come up with a logo, and if you don't get it done this week, you'll do it next week. Don't get overwhelmed by it. But it's actually not as expensive as you would think to trademark stuff. If you want to do like say a T-shirt, it would be about $800, which is a ton of money, but think about it. You know, think about it. I always think, oh, I should trademark my logo, but I'm too cheap. I haven't done it. But I know with my designs of my beadwork and whatnot, they have been copied. And at the end of the day, if I didn't bead it, it's still going to look different. If you want to put it on your, you know, ready-to-wear clothing line, everybody calls me and goes, yo, did you see that dude's using your florals? I'm like, yep, they look good. Like, you just can't sweat about it because you're never going to control that. I mean, that's my opinion. You're never going to control it because somebody from China is going to steal it, and it's very difficult to do international trademarking. But talk to me later, and I can tell you somebody that would help you out with patenting. But also, just don't get overwhelmed. Just rock it a little bit at a time is my advice. They were talking about, don't get like burnt out, or how do you not get burnt out. Those are the days when you're like, I'm not ready to be today because my fingers are killing me, or if my arthritis is acting up or whatever. Those are the days you're like, well, we're going to like dust in the studio, or we're going to do the journaling, or, of all of the receipts, or there's so much you do spend about 20% of your time doing non-art stuff minimum. So those are the days you do that. And when you're first starting up, it is like that. But you don't have to do it all at once. And also make sure that you join Indigenous or Native American Made in Montana, because they will really help you out. And come talk to me later. Hey.
Oh, I just wanted to chime in and say, I think you should build your own website. One, because you understand your stuff the most, and then you're going to understand your own website the most. Templates make everything super easy. When I first started, it was all like HTML coding. Thank you, MySpace, for the lessons. But also, when it comes time to update and add things to the web, you want to know how to do that yourself and to make it fit your needs. So I just wanted to contradict only because I'm a nerd. I built a website for myself, for a nonprofit back home, and for our campground that we have back in East Glacier. So I'm like, websites are simple, but you can play around with them, and you can use free trials, and you can be like, maybe I don't want to do this, or this I could figure out. So, but save yourself a little bit of money, in my personal opinion.
I just wanted to say that just do you, be original, and when it comes to doing anything art-wise or business, that everybody's different, and there ain't no rules, and if there are rules, bend them. Yeah. And you don't need a website, you don't need a business card. I go around with no business card, I have a website. All these old business templates of how to be an artist, that's in the past, that's in the 80s. Back then, you had to walk around with a portfolio of your artwork. You don't even need that no more. Every year, things are changing in the art world, especially with social media and internet. Now with AI, you can have an AI do everything for you.
That's what I don't appreciate.
Well, that's the thing, though. Like, if you say, okay, I'm going to use AI to make my logo, well, that's some artist who designs logos. Got to work. Where does that boulder stop rolling?
Yeah.
I'm going to use AI to write all the text on my website. Well, what about the writers that are trying to put a living together, whose work is getting scraped by AI bots to write this thing for you for free? So you have to remember that when it comes to art, we have to look at all of the ways that it can be stolen from us, because that is happening. And our microphones are dying, one after the other. We probably have room for maybe one more question, if anybody has one. Yes?
What inspires, like when you have a writer's block or an artist's block,
What inspires you is the question.
I'm gonna be straight up, naps. I mean, sometimes I just have to pass out and
just dream or not, but yeah, naps. And then we'll go from there.
Yeah, I have a lot of recipes come to me in dreams, to be honest. So I was going to say naps too. So thanks, Whitney.
I want to be like, after being here and listening to all these writers, I kind of got intimidated because I want to be like Chris and all these writers. I want an agent. No, but for me personally, what inspires me is my community first. So their stories, their personal stories, my family stories, and my stories. So all my art is all of that combined and me telling stories. So like in our language, there is no word for artist. So it's basically like almost like storyteller. And for years, it was hard to accept that. So I consider myself a storyteller rather than an artist.
Someone on the last panel said something that I thought was really beautiful, that when you need inspiration, you can look towards your ancestors, and when you need motivation, to look towards the children. And I think that's very nice.
Yeah, a few grandkids running through the studio is good. I always have so many ideas that I want to do, like in the backlog of my head. Like I'm like waiting, like I don't, that doesn't come up for me. I'm always just like, yeah, I want to do this, I want to do that. Like, and I'll buy something and it'll take me a while, or I'll have an idea of something. And I have those smudge kits out there, and I was like in Target or something, and they had this like smudge kit in a plastic bag or something, and I was deeply offended. And I thought, you know what, if we made a smudge kit, it'd be like bougie, it'd be real badass, it wouldn't look like this crap. But then that was in my head for like 3 years, like how is that gonna play out? And then finally it did. So I always have so many ideas, just like maybe I will, but I don't know I'll ever get them done. But I've always got like things percolating, and I have a bead night on Wednesday nights if anybody wants to go on Zoom and bead. And there's beaders and poetry writers and painters, and we just have every native art form possible. And it actually kind of really would play off of each other. I feel like you should hop on, Shauna. You just play off of each other because somebody's doing something, and then you're like, oh yeah, you know what I could do, and it's something different. You're not copying them. You're thinking like that gave you an idea of something else. And so for me, I feel like that community has really affected my art in a lot of ways. And so, we've been doing it for 5.5 years, and it's a great community. So maybe that's partially too, is I always am playing off of all these other artists. And I think, I will say, we were talking about the whole art thing. So it's hard as beadworkers, and I think you probably get this with moccasins too, Shauna, like people will say, unless you're doing fine art, unless you're being a painter, right, then they're not calling your work art. But since we're talking about stories, what I always say is like, yeah, that's a craft until it has a story. Because the only reason our beadwork was not art was that people wanted to put us down. They didn't want to say, oh, those women are artists. They're true artists. They wanted to say, no, they're just crafters. And you think about fashion. It was never considered art. Why? Because primarily women were making it. And so that ability to try and downplay what people do, it can't be art. It can't be that good because it's only you. So all of our art has a story, and that's the difference between craft and art. If you have a story, which is where it comes from what I saw on a walk, or what I saw my grandkid do, or what I read in a book about my family, or what I heard from another family member, or there's so many things. It's really a story about your day-to-day life and your life of the people that came before you and who are going to come next. And so it's all art.
I just want to add that I have so much ideas in my head that I lose sleep. I have ideas since I was a kid that I'm still waiting to do. And I be around so many creative people that everybody has the same idea. And you always run into the famous uncle that says they invented the ended taco.
Well, with that, we're going to call it a panel. And I want to thank all of you for sticking out all day. What a wonderful day this has been for all of us who've been part of it.
Let's give a round of applause for